Well, the Ohio State Buckeyes with a 56-7 win over Michigan State in their final home game of the 2021 season. I got to be honest, I thought Ohio State was going to win handily. I don't think they were going to be up 49-0 at halftime with numbers in 30 minutes that most 60-minute games would have been more than acceptable. How good was Ohio State? Can we put this into context? And what records did they break or tie today? We'll tell you about that. Coming up, it's our instant analysis post-game show. The Buckeyes win another one here against, this time, the Spartans. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Horseshoe in Columbus. This is Buckeye Breakdown, our instant analysis postgame show after Ohio State just clobbered the number 7 ranked team in the country. I say that sounding like a question because it certainly didn't look like they were a top 10 team this afternoon. Ohio State 56, Michigan State 7. Along with Andrew Lind, I'm Brendan Gulick. Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated with our continuing coverage of this team that has certainly impressed the last couple of games in particular. They don't look anything like what they did in week 2 when they lost to the Oregon Ducks here at home. I mean, I don't even know where to start. CJ Stroud tied the single game Ohio State passing touchdown record in the first half of the game. The Buckeyes, I mean, seriously, like it kind of felt as though if they wanted to score 80 points today, it would have been no problem. They called the dogs off in the second half because they've got a big game to look forward to. But this was an eye-opening victory.
Yeah, I mean, I think you made a really good point there, just saying, they could have probably scored 100 points, if they really wanted to. I think Ryan Day, he admitted it after the game that, they have a big game next week, obviously, and he wanted to, get the guys some rest, some much-needed, well-deserved rest. I spoke about it last week after the win against Purdue. It just felt like they were continuing to build to this point. So it really doesn't surprise me. Maybe I thought that Michigan State would be a little bit better offensively just because, they have Kenneth Walker, who, that sound you hear is his Heisman Trophy candidacy going out the window. But, I thought that they were going to be able to score a little bit more. Ohio State was really impressive defensively. And then that offense, I said it last week as well. I think that it's just one of those things that are putting everything together at the right time. And I really don't know if there's a defense that can stop them when they're hitting.
And I don't want to ignore the defensive effort today because they were very, very good. And holding Kenneth Walker, who absolutely was a legitimate candidate, for the Heisman Trophy. He had 6 carries for 25 yards. He was completely and totally irrelevant in this game. And by the way, 15 of those yards came on 1 carry. The Buckeye defense was terrific. But today was about the offense. And to your point, I know that the second half of the season, the team said it, all the media said it, the schedule was going to get a lot harder. Mm-hmm. And Ohio State was not efficient in the red zone at all against Penn State and Nebraska. I think they had, 2 touchdowns and 9 trips. That's not going to get it done. What the Buckeyes have done against a Purdue team, regardless of your opinion of Purdue, they did beat 2 top 5 ranked teams at the time. And then against a Michigan State team that beat Michigan. This team that Ohio State embarrassed today beat Michigan. For what the Buckeyes did offensively the last 2 weeks. Again, I don't want to get way too far down the road here, but in a sport, in a game that is so offensive minded, you just don't see teams right now that win a national championship that have elite of the elite defenses and decent offenses. Like it's teams that can score at will. And right now, I agree with you, man. I don't know what it's going to take for somebody to stop a team that's clicking like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that Ohio State just, kind of scores at will. I think they scored on 7 consecutive possessions, which, if you're hitting on those kind of cylinders, like it's going to be difficult to stop. And I don't care if you're Georgia, giving up seven points a game. Georgia hasn't faced a team like Ohio State offensively, and it's not even close. So if you want to kind of look ahead to that, but I think the most impressive thing that I've thought that I've seen over the last couple of weeks. And it kind of reminded me of, their struggles at the beginning of the year. They kind of identified and addressed those things, and then you saw the progression where they got better at those things. And I think that was something that kind of happened, especially in the red zone against Penn State and Nebraska. It's not great for those things to happen, but when they do, they kind of identified what went wrong, how we're going to fix it. And then like the last 2 weeks, you've obviously seen, how that's turned around.
I wonder what it must be like right now to be a Michigan fan, because I think there was some small sliver of hope that if you're Michigan and you see Ohio State struggle a little bit, just maybe look clunky, even if they win, just, not boat race the Spartans. I would think that maybe Michigan fans, I doubt it's with the team, right? But from a fan perspective, that maybe you talk yourself into, okay, like this is possible, this is doable. Again, I don't want to downplay Michigan's defense because they've performed well. I think Aiden Hutchinson is probably the best defensive player in the conference. If he's not the best defensive player, he is certainly among them. David Ojabo is a very good defensive end, and he's going to be a tough assignment next week. Michigan's defense is very good. But I thought Michigan State's defense this year had done more than enough to beat teams, despite the fact their pass defense statistically was terrible. You got to be so good to beat Ohio State right now. You can't afford to miss a field goal. You can't afford to give the Buckeyes consistent, workable, manageable situations on first and second down. I should say second and third down. Ohio State ran 49 plays in the first half. They had one negative play. One. And it was CJ Stroud on his own accord just saying, hey, look, this play was broken. He went down for a sack. It was with 3:49 left in the first half. And on 2nd and 18, Mayan Williams ran 19 yards for a first down. I mean, it was almost a joke. I don't want to get too elaborate. I don't want to go over the top. But like, to me, what I watched in the first half was the equivalent of a perfect game, of pitching a perfect game. They did nothing wrong.
Yeah, and you talk about 49 plays. They had 49 points in the first half on 49 plays, which ridiculous. I mean that's ridiculous efficiency. And then it really just reminded me a lot of 2014 in the Big Ten championship game where Ohio State was facing an offense that was led by a Heisman caliber running back and Melvin Gordon, and they completely shut him down. And it was the same kind of thing. Like, I don't think, there's not the circumstances of it being, a must win to get into the playoff or anything like that. But this was a legitimate top 10 team. And Ohio State made them look like they were, a fringe top 25 team, to be honest. And, there was a point in time I looked it up on the sidelines. I was like, what is the worst that a top 10 opponent has ever gotten beaten by? And it was Army over Penn in 1945, 61-0.
That's a hell of a fight.
Yeah, when you go into the half and you're down 14-0, the way Ohio State was kind of humming on offense, that's 2 possessions, and the next thing you're over 61. So, like I said, you don't want to, Brendan obviously mentioned this. You don't want to go, above and beyond about where Ohio State is, but we saw it 2 years ago when Joe Burrow was leading LSU. Their defense, they had some special talent on defense, but it wasn't like their defense was the reason that they won the national title.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of the same thing here. If Ohio State continues to get better, the next week, to be honest, I don't think Michigan has a chance. It just kind of shows you, Michigan and Michigan State were very even. They played a very even game. Either team could have won that game. And I think that, Kenneth Walker is better than both of Michigan's running backs, as he showed in that specific game. So, Michigan does have some defensive pieces, like you mentioned, but they're not going to stop Ohio State, and then their offense isn't going to keep up.
And I think, again, we're going to talk a lot about Michigan this week. So I don't want to get too far ahead of this game. Let's recognize this game for what it is. I feel as though the results that Big Ten teams have largely had this year against Ohio State is maybe not shining the appropriate light on how good the Big Ten has been this season. Because seriously, Michigan State's had a very good year. Give Peyton Thorne some credit. He was down 14-0 a couple minutes into the game, and he made some really strong throws in tight windows in good coverage. He's not a bad quarterback. I actually thought their offensive line today played a little bit better than they have in recent games when Michigan State looked terrible up front. I genuinely believe they played better up front. Michigan's a good team. Purdue's a good team. Wisconsin, Iowa. I mean, this is a really good league this year. And Ohio State is so far in front of everybody else in the conference that maybe results like what we saw today don't do justice to how good Big Ten football has been. But I think Buckeye fans, frankly, don't care. They're looking at where Ohio State is and saying, hey, the Big Ten's not it's not a warm-up, but it's a, hey, let's go take care of business, stay healthy, and take a crack at a national championship. I'll tell you what, right now, I am not afraid of Georgia. Not one bit.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, when it comes to just the Big Ten teams, I think that, once you get into bowl season, you'll obviously find out a lot about those teams specifically. But it's very difficult to kind of compare Ohio State or these teams to Ohio State just because of where Ohio State is. Like, that doesn't mean, like you said, that Michigan State isn't a good team. Michigan's not a good team. I mean, Michigan, they lose next week and they're going to the Rose Bowl and they're going to play, Utah or Oregon in that situation. And I mean, that's nothing to scoff at. No, that's a tremendous season for Michigan or, any other Big Ten team, so to sit there and say, oh, we're not competing with Ohio State or we're not on that same level as Ohio State. I mean, that's the reality of the situation, but they're competing in two different ways if you look at it that way, like from the recruiting trail to even, just winning national titles. Like, it's Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma a little bit, and then the rest of the country. And like you said, that doesn't mean that they're bad teams. They're just not the best of the best.
And let me just be very clear. I'm not sitting here saying, pounding the bully pulpit that the Buckeyes are going to beat Georgia. I'm not that naive. Okay. But I'm not afraid of any team in the country because we're seeing now we're 11 games in and Ohio State is boat racing some really good defensive teams. Today's defensive unit from Michigan State was not the best they've seen this year. I think that's fairly certain, especially with how poor their pass defense has been. I mean, they had mid-majors throwing for 500 yards against them. I told a couple people earlier today that I genuinely thought this game was going to get ugly because I don't think they could cover anybody. But it's enough of a sample size now. I mean, we're all but one game left in the regular season. Even in week 2, when this defense really wasn't playing well, Ohio State still had 600 yards of offense against Oregon. And whether or not you think Oregon is capable of winning a national title, they've still lost only once. Give it a few hours, maybe they'll lose a second time. We'll see. But still, they are currently inside the top 4, and the Buckeyes had no problem moving the football against them. The reason I think Ohio State's national championship aspirations are more legitimate is because the defensive side of the ball. Before we, totally talk defense here, let's just put a bow on the offense. CJ Stroud broke an all-time Ohio State record today with 17 consecutive completions. JT Barrett and Justin Fields had 16 straight completed passes. Barrett did it against Penn State in 2017. And then last year, Justin Fields, between Nebraska and Penn State, the first 2 games of the year, at one point had completed 16 straight. That first half, I mean, I don't want to misquote the numbers here, but CJ Stroud in the first half this afternoon had only 2 incompleted passes, threw for almost 400 yards and 6 touchdowns in one half. I mean, it was laughable how efficient he was. Offensively, the Buckeye receivers, for the second time this year, but also the second time in program history, 3 receivers had more than 100 receiving yards today. 105 on 10 catches for Smith-Njigba and 1 touchdown. 7 catches for Olave, 140 and 2 scores. Wilson had 7 catches for 126 and 2 scores. And of course, Chris Olave broke David Boston's all-time career receiving touchdowns mark. He's got 35 now as a Buckeye. TreVeyon Henderson is an elite running back and didn't have a huge impact on the game today because Ohio State threw the ball however they wanted to. Henderson, 9 carries for 63 yards, had a couple of catches out of the backfield as well. Good for Master Teague, 21 carries, 95 yards, and a touchdown on senior day. Okay, that probably puts a bow on a ridiculous offensive day that featured 655 yards, including 500 at halftime. Let's talk about the defense here, because I think this was a pride game for them, right? They had a highly ranked team coming into the shoe for the final time this year, and they knew all week, they heard and read and saw all week long, you got a Heisman candidate running back coming in, and this guy's the real deal. And the Buckeyes, if they have a vulnerability, maybe it's been their defense. That was a resounding performance.
Yeah, I think, if you look back at the beginning of the year, Ohio State obviously lost to Oregon here for the home opener, and I think that when you get these seniors in these situations, and Haskell Garrett talked about it up at the podium behind us, when you get them in these situations and then you tell them, this is your last time walking out in front of these fans at Ohio Stadium, and you don't have another opportunity in that situation. I think they really took that to heart. And then, like you said, when there's somebody coming in, and I feel like Ohio State kind of always steps up, say for Devonta Smith in the national championship last year, but whenever they end up playing a Heisman Trophy candidate, they kind of step up in that situation. And it takes me back to 2014 again. They faced three straight finalists for the Heisman Trophy on that run to the national championship. And I think that there's just kind of that level of excellence in there. And, they kind of take that challenge and say, we're going to prove that, we're better than them in every single aspect. And I think that they really took it upon themselves. And like I said, Haskell said it in practice this week. They were treating the scout team like he was Kenneth Walker. And I mean, I feel bad for Caden Saunders because, yeah, he was probably getting hit a lot this week, especially the way they were hitting out on the field out there. And, so it really is just a testament to, them kind of recognizing, where their issues were, just continuing to build over the course of the year, and then take it upon themselves to make sure that they walk out of here with, the bells ringing as they leave the stadium.
I'm struggling to think of things that could have gone better, but there are two that come to mind. One, finally, it happened. I don't know if it was bound to happen, but Noah Ruggles missed a field goal. Obviously, that was disappointing, but it made no impact on the game because at that point, Ohio State was out by 7 touchdowns. And then there were a couple of injuries. One on a special teams play, which really stunk. Was it the opening kickoff of the second half? Yeah, it was. Kaczynski got hurt. And then obviously Denzel Burke got banged up. Ryan Day seemed to make it clear to us that Burke would have been able to go back in the game. There's just no reason to put him back in the second half there. So they kept him out. Obviously that's a huge focal point moving forward, right? I mean, he's been Ohio State's best defensive back other than maybe Ronnie Hickman, who I guess I almost consider more of a linebacker just based on where he plays. But Denzel Burke's been a huge piece of this team, and they're going to need him this upcoming week. Got to stay healthy. I mean, that's the one thing that you have to figure out a way to stay healthy the rest of the year here.
Yeah, and things were really going that well today that I almost felt like Ryan Day went up to Ruggles and was like, hey, can you miss this just so I can tell the team, like, we need to improve? Because, at this point in the season.
That's a real hot take.
Yeah. I mean, I know that that's not actually what happened. But, if you come out of a game like this where you just dominated in every single fashion in the first half. And I mean, like we said, if they would have just kept the pedal to the metal, like they would have easily scored 70 points. So, I think that there's things that, Ryan Day's probably happy that happened because he can kind of preach to them, like, we need to improve. We need to continue to get better, because if we're not better next week, then we're going to get beat. And whether or not that actually happens, like, there's a lot of mental games in that. And I think that that's a very important thing. And then obviously with Burke, Ryan Day mentioned it as well. When you're up that big, there really is no need to put people back in there, get them their rest, get them healthy. This is obviously a big stretch because you're going to face Michigan, who is another top 10 team. I don't know what the score of the Wisconsin-Nebraska game is right now, but at the same time, they could be easily a top 12 team by the time the Big Ten championship rolls around. And, those are important things down the stretch. Be healthy, playing your best football at that time.
I'm going to tell you the score of that Wisconsin-Nebraska game. It is tied at 14 at halftime. Iowa leads Illinois 23-16, and they are fairly early in the fourth quarter. Georgia Tech is putting up no fight at all against Notre Dame. That game is 55-0. And Michigan leads Maryland 21-3. The other game that fans might be keeping their eye on in the national picture, there's really two of them. Alabama and Arkansas is competitive, 24-14 Alabama. That game's close to halftime. And Cincinnati, as frankly I think most people kind of expected, they are smashing SMU 27-0, and that game is also just about at halftime. I think we're also going to talk plenty of college football playoff rankings and all the debate around positions and things. I don't know if Ohio State's going to be number 4 this week. I mean, how can you not argue that this team is at least number 2 in the country and maybe number 1? But I'm willing to concede the fact Georgia has played unbelievable football and they haven't lost, so they're going to be the number 1 team. Yeah. To me, the only thing I really care about in the rankings right now is figuring out a way for the committee to look at this and say, okay, Ohio State's offense and Georgia's defense are the 2 best units in the country. If at all possible, don't pit them against each other in a semifinal, because I think that's the championship game that everybody would want to see.
Yeah, and obviously the Oregon game is going to play a big role tonight. They play at Utah, which is always a difficult place to win. That'll play a role in what the top, 4 or 5 teams are. But I mean, I agree with you. And I said it last week as well, that I thought that, if everything continued to go, it was really only inevitable before they passed Oregon. So it almost doesn't matter what happens there. But I can't sit here and say that Alabama is playing better than Ohio State. And if you look at what the committee said, so last week or the week before, they were talking about just comparing Michigan and Michigan State. Even though Michigan State had the better head-to-head win, they said that Michigan was the more complete team. And if you're going to make that argument and you're going to talk about those kind of things, you can't tell me that Ohio State is not a more complete team than Alabama is at this point in time.
Well, and to that point, I thought Gary Barta, if I remember this correctly, he also said that there was somewhat considerable debate between 2, 3, and 4 last week. So if that was the case last week, there's no way that it's not going to be the case this week, unless it's obvious to them that Ohio State is clearly better than those 2 teams. Again, whether you're 2 or 3, I think is kind of irrelevant. It's a neutral site college football playoff semifinal.
It's just what jersey.
What jersey do you want to wear? Yeah. And, do you avoid Georgia in the first playoff game? To me, that's the biggest piece of this. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to get worried about it. Obviously, a pretty impressive win today. I want to wrap by giving a major tip of the cap to Tommy Eichenberg. I don't think there's a player on this team that has improved more than Eichenberg has, who has also taken more criticism than he took. And frankly, justifiably appropriate, because, man, in that Tulsa game, Tommy didn't play very good. He didn't have a single tackle. You're the starting middle linebacker at Ohio State, and you don't have a single tackle in a game. That's hard to wrap your head around. I thought he flew to the football today, and it's becoming pretty obvious why he's a respected guy on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, where did you go to high school?
I may or may not have attended the same alma mater, but I think it's objective.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and I think he definitely has made a significant improvement this year. And the fact that, he's keeping other talented players off the field just kind of goes to show you the improvement that they've seen from him, but then also the kind of the respect and the leadership that he brings to the team. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Tough Borland in that respect. Just, he doesn't make necessarily any flashy plays, but he's at least, I mean, there's kind of a debate whether Tough Borland was the best linebacker, any of that kind of stuff. But I think that my overall point is just that, he is making those plays and being in the right spot now in the season where he's, gaining that respect of his teammates and, going to be in very important situations moving forward.
I remember, over the summer and certainly in the preseason when we would ask Al Washington about this linebacker group, which admittedly we thought was going to look different than it certainly has turned out. Dallas Gant's not here anymore. Kayvon Pope is not here anymore. Taraja Mitchell is a captain and a guy the Buckeyes certainly respect and have leaned on, but not necessarily at linebacker. I almost think Taraja has kind of fallen down the depth chart a bit. Tommy Eichenberg and Steele Chambers have really risen to the occasion on that side of the ball. Cody Simon's proven to be a great player. Certainly not a knock on Taraja, but I remember Al Washington talking about, man, Tommy Eichenberg in the weight room is a dude. He is the real deal and the kind of guy that, this defense is going to rally around, which is why it was deflating to hear that and then see the way he started the season. But where he is now, man, huge jump forward.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very important thing because of just, the lack of depth that they have at that position. I know, up at the top, like you mentioned, Steele, Cody, Tommy, Taraja, and so forth. But then, to take Dallas Gant out of the equation, to take Kayvon Pope out of the equation, those are guys who, if they would have gotten in situations now, it would have been for depth purposes, and that would have been very helpful as you go through the grind of the season. But at the same time, when somebody like Steele Chambers is stepping up, moving over from running back, becoming a star linebacker on this team, like, you don't necessarily miss those guys as much as you probably did. So, for them to be playing at a high level, and then, if you put Taraja and Cody in as well, they're going to play at a high level too, and you're not necessarily worried about that depth.
Awfully fun day for the Buckeyes. 56-7, Ohio State with a resounding win. I know I've used that word a few times, but I can't think of a better way to describe what they did. I mean, that was as close to perfect as you're going to see.
I thought it was funny because Michigan State, on the back of their helmets, it said relentless. And I felt like that was the opposite of what happened today for them.
I'll tell you what, I'll leave you with this parting thought. And perhaps many of you at home saw this. Mel Tucker, apparently as part of his pregame speech to his team, ESPN toward the beginning of the game had, done like a cut into the locker room and showed them rallying the team up or whatever. And Mel Tucker, said something to the effect of, "You're the better team and go out and prove it." And I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, I wonder what he's going to tell these guys at halftime. Like, that's not good.
Yeah. I want to know what he's going to tell the people who are going to pay his $95 million contract.
I hope he signed that this week.
I heard he did not.
Well,
but
not great. Yeah. I mean, it's, and again, they're a good team that had a big old piece of humble pie today. Okay. This was not a close game. But that's not to say that Michigan State is an embarrassing program or opponent. And frankly, depending on who they play in a bowl game, they just might win, especially if it's a good team. They are capable of beating a good team. They beat Michigan. I don't think Michigan is trash, but I also think Ohio State is going to probably have a similar looking performance. I don't know if it's going to be 56-7, but you can't tell me right now that Ohio State doesn't have unbelievable offensive weapons that Michigan is going to be able to totally lock down. Again, leaving on this thought, I mean, the Buckeyes have too many weapons, and as a defense, part of what you can do to make a game go well is take away something from the opponent, the opponent's offense. I think the Buckeyes essentially said today, somebody other than Kenneth Walker is going to beat us. They didn't have an answer for that. And next week, I don't know what Michigan is going to be able to do that's going to totally quash all of the Buckeye options, because I just think they're too deep. I think they've got too many.
I'd say, in the fact that, Julian Fleming comes in and has a touchdown reception today, like, he's been building to that all year, just obviously had some health issues early in the season. But, say for some reason Michigan is able to take away Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith-Njigba, like, I think you can maybe, he's somebody who he showed today that they can rely on in those kind of situations. So, it's one of those things. Not only are they stacked at the top and like in the starting units, but then there's depth there as well. I mean, Master Teague came in today behind Travion and got almost 100 yards. He's, looking big as ever too. I mean, getting those carries, like, those are going to be important down the road too, if they aren't able to get maybe Travion going or something like that. So, there's just so much depth on the team, and, just so many weapons that it doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know how, I mean, I'm happy that I'm not Michigan's defensive coordinator, because that would not be fun.
This has been a fun ride. That's for sure. Ohio State looks right now as good as anybody in America. And it certainly looks like it could be a fun postseason, but especially after being robbed of a rivalry game last week. This is a week that I think everybody in Buckeye Nation is really, really looking forward to, not to mention how well the team is playing. Plenty of coverage coming up as we get ready for the game next Saturday at noon up in Ann Arbor. In the meantime, Ohio State will enjoy this one for the rest of the night, because beating the Spartans is a big deal. 56-7 on annihilation of one of the best teams in the Big Ten. For Andrew Lind, I'm Brendan Gulick. Thanks for joining us for our instant analysis post-game show. We've got lots of coverage already written and several more things to come here the rest of the night tonight over on BuckeyesNow.com. Would certainly appreciate it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel and to our social media channels. Big win for the Buckeyes. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.